So last week we talked about graphing rational expressions as well. We found the zeros, the holes, the vertical and horizontal asymptotes. This week we're going to talk about domain and range, increasing and decreasing intervals, and end behavior. Those are the same I-can statements we had last week. So now the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to factor our numerator and then see what we can cancel, okay? So we're going to do x and x, that's going to be plus 3 minus 1 over x minus 1. So hopefully you see that this repeated factor, which will end up being our whole, is what cancels out. So this is going to be x plus 3. So then we're going to talk about our zeros. So to find our zero, I'm going to write 0 here. We're going to put 0 equals x plus 3. So x is equal to negative 3. So that's our 0. Then we talk about our whole. Actually, let's go ahead and plot that point at negative 3 right there. Okay, then when we talk about our whole, we're going to take this repeated factor, x minus 1, set it equal to 0, so x is equal to 1. Then to do our y value, we're going to take this equation right here, and we're going to put 1 in there. So y is equal to 4. Okay, so our whole is going to be at 1, 4. So we're going to go ahead and draw that now. 1, 4, so I'm going to make a hole right here. And then there's one other way that one other point that I could plot, and that would be putting 0 in for x and solving for y. So y is equal to 0 plus 3. So y is equal to 3. So there is yet another point that we could use to plot. Then we can draw our graph of our line. And it's going to be a line. We know that because it's an x to the first. Okay, so we're going to draw through here and on the other side of here. Okay, so now we're talking about domain. Domain has to do with our x values. Okay, so I'm going to write x values over here. X's, and our range is our y's. Okay, so if we're looking at our x values, we have everything. If we go from left to right here, those are all our x values. This is our x-axis, right? This is our y-axis. So if we look all along our x-axis, everything but 1 is on here. So we're going to say all real numbers. That's how we do that. All real numbers right there. Do 2 lines and then an R. Let me do that again so you guys can see it. So if I'm doing all real numbers, I'm going to do it like this. All real numbers. Okay. I can't. I'm having trouble, y'all. So all real numbers. Except what? So I noticed the only place I can't have it is right there. You'll see where that 1 is because there's a hole there. So except 1. And then y's, again, we're going to have all real numbers except what? See where this is right here? 4. Okay. Then we're talking about asymptotes. Obviously, we don't have any asymptotes here. Why? Because if we were talking about a vertical asymptote, we have none because there was no denominator, right? And when we look up here, if you look here, when we're talking about horizontal asymptotes, if the numerator was greater than the denominator, then there was no horizontal asymptote. So again, this is none. Then we're talking about intervals of increasing and decreasing. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about our x's, okay? So if we're looking at x's, what's happening to the graph? That's what we want to look at. So as we're moving across here from negative infinity to positive infinity, okay? So what happens? So we're going from negative infinity to where? Does it keep going up? And again, we're looking at our graph from left to right. So if it's going up to the right, then it's saying it's increasing. So we're going from negative infinity to this point right here, right? 1. Because it pauses there, right? Because that's a hole. And then it picks back up on 1 and goes on to infinity, okay? So again, we're moving this direction. Y'all got me? Across our x's from negative infinity to positive infinity, okay? Now there was nothing decreasing here because the graph does not go down from left to right. It's only going up from left to right. Now when we're talking about end behaviors, we're talking about y's, okay? So we want to know as x is approaching positive infinity here. What's happening to our y's up here, y'all? That's what we're asking. So this is going towards positive infinity, right? So that's what we're putting here. And again, as x is approaching negative infinity, that's what this means right here, x is approaching negative infinity, what's happening to our y value? Isn't it approaching negative infinity right here? So that's what end behaviors mean, what's happening at the ends of the graph, okay? All right, so our next one, again, we're going to factor this again. So y equals x plus 4 and x minus 1. There's the factors of that. And then we have x plus 4 and x minus 2, right? So hopefully you see again here we have a repeated factor that's going to end up being our zero, or our whole. So we got y equals x minus 1 over x minus 2, right? So now we want to talk about our 0. So our 0, we're going to set our numerator equal to 0. So that's x minus 1 equals 0. So x equals 1. So that's our 0 at 1. I'm going to go ahead and plot that right there. Okay, then we want to find our whole. We have a repeated factor, right? So we're going to deal with our whole now. Our whole is x plus 4 equals 0. That's our repeated factor. So that's x equals negative 4. Then we're going to put that negative 4 back up in that equation up there. So we're going to go y equals negative 4 minus 1 over negative 4 minus 2. That's going to be negative 5 over negative 6, which is really going to be y equals 5/6. So our whole is going to be at negative 4, comma, 5/6. So I'm going to try to draw a hollow dot there, negative 4, negative 5, I'm sorry, positive 5/6. So that's pretty close to 1 actually, y'all. So let me see if I can do that. It's kind of like right there, closer, right? Sorry, put it in the wrong place again. It's negative 4, 5/6, right there. Okay, that's close. All right, so then we want to talk about our asymptotes. So when we talk about our vertical asymptote, we're talking about setting our denominator equal to 0. So x minus 2 equals 0. So x equals what? Positive 2. So our vertical asymptote is x equals 2. Again, we're going to draw that right here. And then we want to talk about our horizontal asymptote. And again, we're going to compare those two right there. So that means they're equal. So we're going to say y equals, there's a 1 in front of there and a 1 in front of there, right? So we're going to do 1 over 1, which equals 1. So our horizontal asymptote, that's what this is equal to, horizontal asymptote, is y equals 1. So we're going to go ahead and do that one right here. Okay, now, what I typically like to do at this point is go look at an actual graph of this equation. So we can either use Desmos or we can use the graphing calculator. I'm going to show you the graphing calculator first. So if you have the TI-84, guys, you can go to y is equal to, enter your equation here, which I've already done just to save time. And then we're going to click on graph, okay? So then it's going to show us the graph of the equation. And you should notice here when you're looking at this graph that we have a horizontal asymptote right here at y is equal to 1, and we have a vertical asymptote right here where x is equal to 2. Notice also here that it intersects the x-axis at 1. Okay, now another thing you guys can do is you can look at the table here and it's going to show you where these errors are. And the error here is at 2 because that's where our vertical asymptote is, and an error at negative 4 because that's where our whole is. These are some other points that you guys could use to go ahead and plot your graph, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and use some of these points. So we're going to go over here, we're going to go through that, not all the way through it, but we're going to do our best to go through these points that we plotted, okay? So getting close to our asymptotes here, okay, because that's what they are. They mean that our graph approaches them but never really reaches them. Now we're going to talk about domain and range, okay? So when we're talking about our domain is going to be our x values again. So when we're looking at our x values, when do we not, where does x not? So we have all real numbers except what? Notice right here at negative 4 and right here at 2. So we're going to look at our wholes and our vertical asymptote. So it's not going to be at -4 and it's not going to be at 2. Again, when we're looking at our range, we're looking again at our holes and our horizontal asymptotes. So here again at our hole, we had 5/6. There's right here. And then our horizontal asymptote is 1. Okay? Now we're talking about increasing, decreasing. This time, if we're going from left to right, we're going from negative infinity here with our x values. What's happening to the graph? Do you notice it's falling? And even when we cross over that x equals 2, it's still falling, right? So this is going to have no increasing, so there's none here for increasing. But the decreasing is going to go from where? Negative infinity. Again, now we're talking about our x values, guys. So negative infinity to our -4 again. Then we're going to pick it back up at -4, and we're going to go over here to 2. And then we're going to pick it back up at 2, and we're going to go on to infinity, or positive infinity, okay? So again, we're looking from here. We're going from here to right there, and it pauses, right? And then we're going from here to right there, and it pauses, and then we're going from here on to infinity, okay? Now, when we're talking about end behaviors, we're talking about y's, because this says as we approach positive infinity here, as we approach positive infinity, what's happening to our graph right here, guys? What's happening to it? It's coming down, then it's approaching that horizontal asymptote, right? So this is what's going to help us here, horizontal asymptote. So it's approaching 1 here. And as we're going up towards negative infinity, what's it approaching here as well? Also 1. So here's a trick for you guys, okay? So when we're dealing with these right here, you want to look at your holes and your vertical asymptotes, okay? And when we're dealing with our end behavior, we want to look at your horizontal asymptotes. That's what's going to help you out with these answers, okay? All right, now let's go ahead and factor number 2. So this one's going to be y equals, again, we're going to factor the numerator and the denominator. So this is going to be x minus 2, x minus 3. This is going to be x minus 1 and x minus 3 again. So hopefully you see already, we're going to end up with a hole, right, at that point. Our equation is going to be y is equal to x minus 2 over x minus 1. We want to talk about our zeros. So we're going to set with our zeros. We're going to do x minus 2 equals 0, so x equals 2, right? So we're going to go ahead and plot that point, 2. Then let's talk about our holes. That's our repeated point, right? So our hole is going to be at x minus 3 equals 0, so x equals 3. Then we're going to put that value 3 up there in that equation. So y is equal to 3 minus 2 over 3 minus 1. That's going to end up being 1/2. So our hole is going to, so our 0 was at 2, right? Right here. And our hole is at 3, 1/2. So let's go ahead and plot those points. So we got a 0 at 2. We already plotted that one. Let's go ahead and plot our hole now. Is it 3, 1/2, right? So it's kind of like right there, somewhere in the middle there, right? Okay, then we want to talk about our vertical and horizontal asymptotes, right? So let's talk about our horizontal asymptote, or actually our vertical asymptote. We're going to set our denominator equal to 0. So that's going to be x minus 1 equals 0, so x equals 1. So that's our vertical asymptote. X equals 1. We're going to go ahead and do that dashed line right here. Okay. Then we want to look at our vertical asymptote, right? So we're going to look right here at these, remember? So y, so when our horizontal asymptote, did I say that? Okay, anyway, y equals, again, we got a 1 over a 1, right? 1 over 1 equals 1, equals y. So that's our horizontal asymptote. Y equals 1. So we're going to go ahead and do that one. Okay, so now I'm again going to go look at the graph. Now this time I'm going to look at Desmos for y'all, okay? So this time I went to Desmos, guys, and hopefully again you can see that we have a horizontal asymptote here at y is equal to 1 and a vertical asymptote right here at x is equal to 1. We intersect the graph here at 2, 0 and here at 0, 2. So I want to go back to here so I can show you guys what we do here to go ahead and graph it. Recall again that we could actually find this y-intercept up here, guys, by putting 0 up here. 0 there, 0's there. That would give us -2 over -1, which would be 2, right? So that's another point that we could plot to go ahead and graph. That is our y-intercept, okay? So now I'm going to go ahead and draw these graphs. And so I have one that goes along here, and it goes through that point. It goes up there, again, by our asymptotes. And then I have another one that's going up here. It goes to that point and then goes beyond. So now let's talk about our domain and range, okay? So our domain is going to be, again, all real numbers except what, guys? So let's look where we don't have any, so we don't, right here, we don't have, so that's going to be what? Except 1, and then what else? Over here at 3, y'all see this right here? Where the hole is, okay? When we're talking about our range, okay, we're going to have all real numbers again, except what? So this time we're looking for our hole in our horizontal asymptote, okay? So our hole is at 1/2, that's the y value, and our horizontal asymptote was at 1, okay? So now again, when we're talking about increasing, decreasing, we're talking about x values, okay? So on this one, again, look at the graph. When we are moving across the graph, here it's going up. Y'all notice that? So that's increasing. Here it's going up too. So we're not going to have any decreasing. We're only going to have increasing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say none here. So when is it increasing? From, okay, again, remember this is -infinity here. So when we go from -infinity to where? Where's our first stopping point? It's right here, right, y'all? So that's at what? 1, right? So this goes from -infinity to 1, and then we pick back up at 1. And we go from 1 to where? Right here, right? To 3. So that's going to be 3. And then we pick back up and we go from 3 on to +infinity. Okay? All right, now end behaviors, again, we're talking about y's because this is y. Fx is y, right? Okay, so now we're talking about, so when we're going in this direction, what's the graph approaching, y'all? So here's our graph. What's it approaching? Looks to me like it's approaching that y equals 1, right? And over here, when we're going towards -infinity, what is it approaching? It's approaching, again, this right here where y equals 1. Okay? All right, let's go on to this U try. You guys go ahead and do this. Come back to me when you're done, okay? I'm going to go ahead and factor it. You should do the same. Pause the video and come back when you're done. Okay, so hopefully all of y'all see immediately. There are no holes here, so we can write none right here. Okay? Then when we talk about our domain and our range, we're going to talk about that after we graph it, okay? So our zeros, again, we're going to set our numerators equal to 0, right? So when we do our zeros, we're going to do x plus 3 equals 0, so x equals -3. X minus 3 equals 0, so x equals 3. So our zeros are -3 and 3, right? Then let's talk about our asymptotes, okay? So let's go ahead and plot these first. -3 and 3, okay? Then we're going to talk about our asymptotes, okay? So when we're looking at our vertical asymptote, let me do this in a different color. We're going to set our denominators equal to 0. So we're going to do x plus 2 equals 0. So x equals -2. X minus 2 equals 0. So x equals 2. So those are going to be our vertical asymptotes, okay? So our vertical asymptotes are going to be x equals -2 and x equals 2, right? So I'm going to go ahead and draw those. Those are our vertical asymptotes right here. And this is going to be a different looking graph than anything else we've done, guys, okay? We got another one right here. Okay. Then let's talk about our horizontal asymptotes. Again, we're looking at these right here, remember? So when we're talking about our horizontal asymptote, it's going to be y is equal to, again, there's a 1 over a 1 here, right? So 1 over 1, which equals 1. So our horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals 1. So let's go ahead and draw that. There it is. Okay. So now, if we go and look at this graph on, so I went ahead and entered this, and then this is what we get. So you should notice here again, we have a horizontal asymptote at y equals 1, and then we have one here at x equals -2 and one that we're at x equals 2. Now the other point that we could find, and I'm going to show you how to do this in just a second, is this point right here, and that's when we would put 0 in for x and solve for y, okay? These are the other 2 points that we had, -3, 0, and 3, 0, right? So this is our graph. Now let's go back to here, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and graph this, okay? I'm going to do it. Let me find this other point. So if I wanted to find the y value here, guys, so then what I would do is I would say y equals, and I would put 0 plus 3, 0 minus 3, 0 plus 2. That's going to be our y-intercept, 0 minus 2, right? So that's going to give me 3 times -3 over 2 times -2. That's going to give me -9 over -4, which is 2.25, which is what we saw just a second ago. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that right there. Now I'm going to actually draw my graph. So over here, I'm approaching over here, and I'm going down. And over here, I'm approaching over here, and I'm going up that way. Okay. And then here, this is a U, basically, right, y'all? Okay, so now, so let's talk about our domain. So we got all real numbers. That's what this symbol means. All real numbers except what? So look right here. Right there and right there. That's where we're crossing, right? So that's going to be -2 and 2. When we're talking about our range, it's going to be all real numbers except what? This time it's just right there, right? So that's going to be except 1. Okay, now increasing again, we're looking at our x values, right? So are we increasing or decreasing? So I'm going from here left to right, I'm going down, aren't I? So that's decreasing from -infinity to where? To right here. Y'all notice that? So that's -infinity to 2. And then here, I'm still going down. Y'all see this? I'm going down right there from what? From 2 to 0, right? But then what happens? What happens from that point forward? Y'all look. I'm going up here, aren't I? So from 0 to positive, oh, that should have been -2, y'all. My bad. From 0 to 2, positive 2, I'm going up. And then what else? From 2 to infinity, I'm going up. Okay. Now let's talk about end behavior. Again, we're talking about y stuff there. Okay. So our end behavior here. So what happens as we're approaching positive infinity here to the graph? Where's it approaching? Isn't it approaching 1 again? And over here, as we're approaching negative infinity, what's happening to our graph? What's it approaching? 1 again, right here. See, this is this line right here. Y'all see it? Because that's a y value. Okay. Here's our last one. So again, y equals, we're going to factor the numerator, x plus 4 and x plus 2. Down here we got x plus 4 and x minus 4. Okay, again, so pause the video, do the rest of this, come back to me when you're done. So these cancel out. That's going to be our whole. So we got y equals x plus 2 over x minus 4. We're going to find our 0. So our 0, we set our numerator equal to 0. So that's x plus 2 equals 0. So x equals -2. That's our 0, right? Then we're going to talk about our whole. So with our whole, y'all, we're going to, let me go ahead and erase this and do it again so I can show y'all. So with our whole, we're going to do x minus 4 equals 0, so x equals 4, and then we're going to put that 4, wait, no, that was x plus 4, sorry. So it's going to be a -4, because we're doing this number, because this is what's repeated, right? So then we're going to put that -4 plus 2 over -4 minus 4, that would be -2 over -8, which is 1/4, right? So that's how I got -4 1/8 over here. So we're going to then plot that -4 1/8. That's going to be over here, okay? Then we're going to talk about our vertical asymptote. So let me go ahead and erase this because I did it and then I went back. Okay, so our vertical asymptote, we're going to take our denominator and set it equal to 0. So we're going to do x minus 4 equals 0. So x is equal to 4. So x equals 4 is our vertical denominator. So we're going to do that over here. Okay, then we're going to talk about our horizontal asymptote. Okay, that's this again. So our horizontal asymptote, we have the same number on top and bottom, x squared and x squared. So that's going to be 1 over 1 equals 1, which equals y. So this was our vertical asymptote. And then our horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals 1. So we're going to put that right here. Now, honestly, even before we graph, by now, you guys should be able to tell me the domain and range. Okay, so the domain this time is going to be all real numbers except what? Look right here, -4 and +4, right? -4 and +4. And our range is going to be all real numbers except what? Our y value, which was 1/4, so except, sorry, I should have put except over here too, y'all, except those two. 1/4, and then our horizontal asymptote, right? Okay, now talking increasing, decreasing. So I want you guys to look at the graph and then come back to me. Hopefully what you guys saw when you were looking at your graph is this. So our graph went over here, and then it touched this point, went through there, and it's going to go all the way over here to this line. Okay, and up here, same thing. Okay, so it's approaching. So when we're talking about our x values increasing, what's going to happen? So as we're going across our x, we're going to go from, again, -infinity here. Is it increasing or decreasing, y'all? I don't see any. So it's going down, right, and down. Y'all notice that? So we have none here. I don't know what's going on with my mouse. And then we're going from -infinity to where? Right here, right? To 4. And then we're going to go from 4 to where? Where the other vertical asymptote is. To +4, right? So from, sorry, that was supposed to be -4, y'all. To +4. And then we're going to go from +4 over here on, right? To infinity. So +4 on to infinity. That's our increasing, okay? Now, again, remember, end behavior has to do with y. So as we approach positive infinity here, where's our graph approaching? It's approaching 1. Remember, this is our horizontal asymptote, right? Over here, as we're approaching -infinity, what's happening to the graph? It's also approaching 1. So I'm going to remind you guys one more time, when we're talking about this stuff right here, we're talking about vertical asymptotes and we're talking about holes. Okay, that's what's going to affect that. Down here, when we're talking about our end behavior, it's our horizontal asymptotes.